quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Hello, you're listening to the podcast, So There I Was. This is episode number 149, My Leading Edge.
Nice. A great tribute to these two pilots, one's father and one's grandfather. We got two generations of Army attack pilots.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Let's start with a big thanks to HSI Wealth Strategies, Robbie Walling. We appreciate your support. Give Robbie a call if you'd like to retire comfortably.
Right? Exactly. I mean, don't go off course. Don't crash land short of the runway.
No.
Get to your retirement goals.
And don't think you're smart enough to do it yourself either.
Right? Because you're not. You're a pilot. Well, he's a pilot too, and they are pilots, but they specialize in this now. So this is what they do. How many guys do you know manage it themselves and screw it up? Don't screw it up.
Not good.
Yeah. Thanks also to Every Plate. They sponsored us this week, a new sponsor. I really love their food. And I asked my wife, I said, what do you like most about it? She said, the recipes were much easier to prepare than she expected. So outstanding food, easy preparation, and great prices. So everyplate.com/podcast and use the code STIW50, Sierra Tango India Whiskey 50 for 50% off your first box. And thanks to our supporters, right, Fig?
Oh my gosh, our pilot supporters, we are so humbled and appreciate your support. They have almost, tripled what it costs to record the podcast now?
Yeah.
Our streaming service. So your support makes all the difference in the world.
Yep. We can cover it this year because of your generosity. Hey, let's get back to the show. Good show this week. Two pilots on again. So that's 2 weeks in a row with two pilots.
Yeah.
This time, two Army attack pilots, a generation apart. Father and son. Yeah.
Father, son. Pretty unique situation. The father grew up in Plains, Georgia, which happened to be a hometown of a very significant other person in history. And that was President Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, who administered his oath of office. How cool is that?
They were neighbors.
Yeah, and his dad was friends with Jimmy. So, President Carter. Met his wife there, wasn't too interested in school and all that, didn't know what he wanted to do with his life, except that, he wanted to farm. And then he got off to school and went, oh, you know what, I like flying too. I saw helicopters bringing the president in and out of town, and that looked pretty cool. And next thing you knew, he had the flying bug.
And then he was off to the races with a purpose.
Absolutely.
Good story about that.
Yep. And where he opened the show, right?
Yeah, the show opener's an attention getter, like they all are.
Right.
I don't want to run it, but he was in a precarious situation. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. And talk about, hey, one thing we occasionally talk about on the show is compartmentalization, right? And man, if you ever had to compartmentalize, this was it. A couple other good stories. One is actually we reserved for our Patreon and financial supporters only, is something that happened, but it has to do with the fact that we did have father and son on board. So that was pretty neat. The fact that they're both Army attack helicopter pilots flying different generation aircraft.
Yeah. There's several very unique parts to this story.
Yeah.
And I don't want to run it.
No.
But it's very unique, historically unique.
But the coffee cadet is now a captain in the Army who flies, right?
Yes.
Yeah, got his first ride with his dad in a Cobra at, I think he said 12 years old.
Making all by itself, right?
Yeah, not many 12-year-olds get to ride in a Cobra helicopter. That is cool. The other part of this show is the book, and it's My Leading Edge, which is how he refers to his father. It's a dedication to his father and the faith that he was brought up in, and really fascinating to see how he put it all together related to flying.
Yeah, it's actually tied in very, very nicely and neat. And it makes a lot of sense when he explains it.
The book's an easy read, lots of pages with pictures in it for us Marines, and
nice pictures.
And a good read. And much of it deals with an incredibly helpless feeling that was foisted upon both Jeff and his bride as they faced the health challenges for a child, that they were not sure of the outcome on the front end of that. it does have a happy ending, and he talks about that in the story and in the book or in the show. But dang, I think I've talked long enough anyway. What about you?
Let's get out of the way and let it rip.
Let's do it. Don't sit on the collection.
Here's a true story
Don't sit on the
about crossing the pond at night in the world's smallest cockpit on the tanker through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that, thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly.
So there I was, sitting on the Iraqi border and helpless to aid my family. This is how difficult military service can be for families in a way that most civilians don't understand. I had a powerless feeling that is difficult to describe. There was no such thing as a satellite phone, so I couldn't call or text Camille. I had a duty as a soldier and a pilot to fight for my country, but I also had a duty as a husband and a father to fight for my family and protect them. I was in a war, and there was nothing else I could do but do my job and pray.
Boom. Hell, hey, what chapter was that from? Because
that's pretty early on. That's I believe in chapter 3.
So that is how we're starting. So there I was today, and this is Fig. I am lucky enough to be at home for like 25 hours. Where's my co-host?
I'm home as well in New Hampshire. Repeat here. And that was none other than Jeff Moss, author of My Leading Edge. We're blessed enough to be joined by Jeff and his progeny. How's that go? I may have misused the word, but I tried to sound smart. His son, Jay, who is also an Army attack helicopter pilot. And wow, gents, we are thrilled to have you with us. Jeff, where are you?
I am in Southport, North Carolina.
Nice. And how about you, Jay?
Mableton, Georgia.
Nice. All right. Well, welcome to you both. That was fantastic. Folks, I read this book, My Leading Edge, and I don't remember the number of pages off the top of my head. I think it's in the 140, 150 page range, something like that, right, Jeff?
It's an easy read.
That's right. That's right. There are 30 pages of pictures, so it's a pretty easy read, even for Marines.
Yeah, easy, even for Marines.
I really like the pictures. Thank you.
Pictures are great. You know, picture book is good for us. But man, let me tell you, if you want a story of what it's like to grow up and find yourself going, maybe I'd like to look at this military thing, and then see what challenges are. These challenges hit every family, but more so, obviously, to military families. And it's a story of hope, of challenges, of heart-wrenching. Tragedy isn't the right word, but heart-wrenching challenges that absolutely would tear so many people apart. And instead, brought Jeff and his wife to a deeper faith, and much of that is what this book is about. And it's a fun read. It's funny. You'll tear up. It's amazing. So there's my praise. Go get the book, My Leading Edge, if you want a great story. Let's start at the beginning, Jeff, with, well, you kind of do it in the book. Let's kind of follow the line of the book and where and how you grew up and some of the interesting people in your neighborhood and how that led to a life in the military and military aviation specifically.
Well, I grew up in a small southwest Georgia town called Plains, Georgia. And we had,
I think I've heard of that, Fig.
Yeah, we had one famous citizen there.
Peanut farms around there, right?
Yeah, some peanut farms. And this gentleman came up on the radar, and people would say, Jimmy who? So my dad moved to Plains in 1961 with my mom and my brother and sister. And my dad he ran the experiment station there for the University of Georgia, and we literally lived on that farm. So for the first 9 years of my life, I was more or less a spare farmhand to my dad on this state-owned farm that I believed was his.
Go get the what's it, boy.
Oh, yeah. I absolutely thought it was Dad's place. And Grew up a very mischievous child in this small town of Plains, Georgia. So mom said I gave every gray hair she's got on her head. And we're fortunate that she's still living. I just lost my dad in January. But he was the inspiration that, I wanted to write the book for him. And I wanted to get it in his hands before he passed away. But it simply tells the story of a small town country man. I love the country music connotation that goes with that. Obviously, there have been some great songs written about guys like my dad. But he raised me to believe that I could do pretty much anything I set my mind to. And my mother was the encourager. And in the middle of all this growing up, when I'm on the age of 12, my dad's good friend and our neighbor, Jimmy Carter, was elected president of the United States. And that led to a lot of unique opportunities that as a young man, I'm quick to tell people that I'm not somebody that's really going to talk about President Carter's politics because I was a kid. But I can tell you that post-presidency, he was a fine man in terms of not only his faith, but also his contribution to humanitarian efforts and things he did around the world. So that was the man I knew. I didn't know of his politics. And I would say if Dad were alive, he'd tell you the same thing. They were friends first. All the politics stuff, is on the sidebar when you're friends with people. And that is something I think we all experience. But growing up in Plains, I was very focused on becoming a farmer like my dad. I wanted to follow in his footsteps and take over his role at the University of Georgia Experiment Station in Plains. Basically meet my wife right after I graduated from high school at church in a Sunday school class. Her dad made her come. And
hey, can we back up for just a second? Your dad
100%.
was a huge inspiration, obviously, in this. One of my favorite stories early on is what you did to make sure you got to stay close to Dad.
Yeah. So,
it's a scene right out of American Graffiti, Fig.
I know. I want to hear him tell that.
Yeah. Among other things that caused my mom and dad a lot of consternation. Dad would tell me all the time, I'm going to take you to town. I'm going to town, because going to town off a farm was a big deal. So at about the age of 6, Dad said, I'm going to town and, whatever. We had pole barns. Are you guys familiar with pole barns?
Yes.
Maybe some of the listeners aren't, but all the tractors and equipment and trucks were parked under pole barns that were a roof suspended by telephone poles. So I got the idea that I'd tie Dad's truck to the barn, and I did. And one of the farm hands got in his truck and tried to move, and it wouldn't move. So the harder he tried, you can just see a truck on a red Georgia clay deal, spinning the tires, smoke going up, dust everywhere, and the whole barn shaking. And one of the other guys said, "Stop, Jeff's done tied the truck to the barn." So needless to say, Dad came home and he wasn't amused, but the knot didn't break. My sister told me after she read the book that I was mistaken, that the rope broke, but the knot held. And I don't remember the rope breaking. The story I know is that Mr. Howard Dupree nearly tore the barn down where a 6-year-old child had tied a truck to the pole barn to make sure Daddy didn't leave without me. So I go through the book talking about some of the life lessons we learned growing up on a farm, and even get into just simple things Daddy taught me about feeding animals. Don't get between the animal and the trough, for example, stuff like that. I had the luxury of having a cousin that's an animal whisperer, and I don't use that term loosely. Jay can tell stories of the things he's witnessed as a child that my cousin Harold Goldman in Lincoln, Georgia has done. But all of these life lessons, and the thing that we really get into is task, condition, standard. Everything Daddy taught me from the time I was a little kid was there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And he was my original leading edge. And as you guys know, the leading edge is the front edge of the prop. The front edge of the rotor blade, airplane prop, is the strongest part of the blade. And it's the one that more or less blazes a trail that leads us forward through the air. And everything's good until you have a bird strike, right? Or you suck a bird into an impeller on a turbine engine, as Sully would say. But Dad was the leading edge. And the point that the book is titled after was he introduced me to Christ, and Christ became the center of everything that we did. And thankfully, because he did that and was such a great servant leader and presented to me the style of leadership that I wanted to emulate as a grown person, and to my son, to Jay, and to my daughter, Mallory, he set the tone. And that's really where the book takes off, is on that farm and those lessons Dad taught me. And we walked through that into the military.
Nice. Okay.
I love the title, and I love the meaning behind it. It is outstanding.
We struggled over it, guys. I mean, there's a story.
So what were some other titles you thought about?
Moss sauce. Dad had developed his own barbecue sauce, and it's called affectionately Moss sauce.
Okay.
And I'm really good at asking people questions and taking guidance. And people were saying, people are going to see that title and they're going to have no idea what to do with it or what the book's about. When I got out of the military, the second title, working title we had, was When Daddy Was a Real Man. Because when the kids were growing up and they would ask me questions, I would reflect back to the days of being in the military and attack helicopter pilot. I said, well, back when Dad was a real man, and I would answer the questions. So my wife said, that's a title. We got to the point that we were struggling threading the needle and making the book come together from front to back. And I was in Americus, Georgia, and a wife of a good friend of mine basically called me on the carpet and said, when are you going to get this book done? And this was back in November of last year. I was driving home from Georgia. It's about an 8-hour trip. And
November 23?
Yeah. This was like 23, November 23. And actually, I'm sorry, November 24. We were almost done.
Was it? Okay. All right.
Yeah, we just couldn't get it finished. And I called my wife and I said, there's two things. One, if we don't get this published before I lose Dad, I'm going to be very upset, or Mom, because I want to put it in their hand, because it's really a testimony to them as much as anything else, because they are the DNA. They set the tone of legacy leadership with our family. And second of all, it honestly is something that I think will help young people and anybody that reads it hopefully get some lessons of life, that things aren't going to be smooth flying. You're going to have engine failures. You're going to have things happen, and you can make a choice. You can run to your spouse or run away from them, or you can run to God or run away from God. And I really wanted to get that finished and get it out there. So I called her on the way home and I said, we've got to get this done. And she said, I'm missing the thread. We talked about it. And Camille came up and said, Jeff, aviation's been the thread of our life. From the time I met you, pretty shortly thereafter, you wanted to be a pilot. So maybe aviation's the common link. And when we figured that out, the book started really coming together. And then from there, we added the Bible verses, because I thought it was very important that we intersperse Bible verses that helped us through some of the more difficult times from being in the military moving forward.
Nice. Okay. And I got to say, as you've gone through this, I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm guessing you may be. It almost sounds like the song by Alan Jackson, Small Town Southern Man.
It is. I actually referenced that at my dad's funeral. I had our pastor, because I got my mother's heart. I'm an emotional person, and I knew I could not stand behind my dad's flag draped coffin and talk about him. So I wrote my version of the eulogy, and I referenced that Alan Jackson song, two of them, Small Town Southern Man and Daddy Let Me Drive. And I used both of those as a catapult for the pastor's comments about the way my dad led his life, and the fact that he put a Sears and Roebuck catalog under my rear end and behind my back. And he had me driving stuff that today, if somebody saw it, they'd probably have you in court, But that's the way I came up.
All right. Hey, well, let's, Jay, you got some granddad memories maybe we can share as long as we're on this subject?
Oh, so he taught me how to drive as well. I think my first run-in with a clutch was the 1945 Ford tractor. It's still sitting out in the backyard. And my people had kind of asked me, have you ever driven anything with a clutch before? I think I'm like 6 or 7 years old. And I was like, no, I haven't. And he's like, well, just let it out real slow. And I don't know what real slow was to a 7-year-old, but I pretty much let that clutch go. And if you want to know, 1945 Ford tractor can stand all the way up on the back wheels. And
nice.
Yeah, that scared the devil out of both of us, I think.
Yeah.
He took action and, was able to get the nose down and drop that tractor back on the front wheels. But yeah, that one stands out for sure.
Wow. Nice. Okay.
He was very much a get in there and do it kind of guy.
Yeah.
And it was, hey, if you haven't done it, now the time is a present. So let's go. And he threw Jay up on the tractor. I might not have been there. I can't remember.
That was a summer that I was with them. I'm kind of having a memory come back now when it came back down. That it is a little bit bigger than that, but that's not far off the mark. And he is like, yeah, so that was too fast.
Yeah, there you go. So that's a reference. I put up on the screen a picture of a 45 Ford tractor. It's kind of an off-white and red paint scheme on those. Beautiful tractors.
Looks just like it. It's a little bit like Jay said, it was an 8-in Ford, and Dad was driving it at 93. He was still cutting his own lawn at 93. And he started getting dementia issues at 94. And it was literally, as I detail in the book, I go home in the fall and he's out there grinding leaves and come back 3 months later and the grass needed mowing and Dad was showing zero interest in getting on his John Deere riding lawnmower that was appropriately labeled Boss Moss for him, as everybody knew him. And it was shocking how quick he fell off the ledge of having dementia issues and things like that. I'm just thankful that when he passed, he knew who he was, he knew who we were, he knew his grandchildren, and that's a blessing.
Yeah, fantastic. All right.
You have no fear though. That's just the bottom line, and I think Jay witnessed that.
I was going to say that's something he talked about it plainly for years. I mean, from 65 onwards, I would say. I forget, maybe Dad can remind us when they bought their plot just outside of town, but they bought their funeral plot. And he was very plain and calm about talking about the fact that they were going to go over there and take a nap at some point. And they went over there and tended the plot and cut grass, over their burial plot regularly into their late 80s. But like Dad said, and Mima too, for that matter, right now, I mean, she's not in the best of health, but I've never heard either one of them balk about a fear of death or passing. For them, it's almost inconsequential, or at least you would think so.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. So, all right. I interrupted you. You were talking about meeting your bride.
Yeah.
And you were a freshman in college? Sophomore?
I was spread out. She had been to Georgia for a year and come home. So she's 9 months older than me, which will get me in trouble for telling. But I was fresh out of high school. I was 18 and I was a summer youth worker at her church. It happened to be in the same town where my brother lived with his wife. And they had just had their they had two little girls at that point, Courtney and Ashley. So I go down to live with them because I wanted to go work for this pastor that had been my childhood pastor in Plains. Well, he got moved. So when I got down there, that deal kind of fell apart. And then they said, oh, you're going to be teaching the Sunday school class for the college age kids. And I'm fresh out of high school. So I'm a little intimidated by this factor. And Camille showed up, that first Sunday. Like I said, her dad made her come. And the next thing became, I'd like to date this girl. So I go ask the new pastor, who I didn't really know that well, hey, is it okay if I ask one of the college age girls out on a date? He said, sure, no problem. And I called Camille up and played like a lot of men do. Hey, I'm new here. I don't know my way around. Will you take me to Tallahassee and show me the ropes to try to get in, right, and get a date? So we did, and we never really looked back. We started dating that summer, and she has confided years later that months before that summer, when they introduced me at church as being the summer youth worker, she had her eyes on me, but she never let on, right? So you hear that, 25 years into your marriage and things like that. But we go, Camille transferred to Valdosta State for a year. I'm at Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College, about an hour away. we do that for a year, and then we both go to Athens to the University of Georgia, which, we all know is one of the number one party school in the world is the University of Georgia. And somehow, between everything going on, we managed to continue dating for those next 3 years, and then we got married in the summer of '87. But the big drop bomb I laid on her was that sophomore year when I realized the University of Georgia wanted whoever replaced my dad to have a PhD in agriculture, and I wasn't a fan of school. And I'm thinking I'm going to be good to be. Jay saw some of my high school report cards a few weeks ago, and he's like, "Oh my God, Dad!" And I'm like, "I told you, I was not a serious student at that point."
No,
and
listen, a lot of us weren't. There was a lot of other distractions going on in high school, and schoolwork was not a real high priority for me.
It wasn't for me either. I wanted to ride my motorcycle. I wanted to play baseball, football. I wanted to do anything but study. And I love to tell this story because my brother's 9 years older than me. My sister's 6 years older than me. And I tell people I was a Sunday afternoon that got out of hand. I just kind of showed up, right?
Yeah.
And by the time I come along, Mom and Dad are kind of tired. So I pretty much got to do whatever I wanted to do. And my brother told me the other day, he comes home from college and I'm a young teenager. And he said, I looked at Mom and Dad and said, you guys let Jeff get away with everything. Whatever he wants to do, no wonder you're having
That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And I personally believe it was an attack helicopter pilot in development.
Yes, it probably was.
Yeah. That's how we roll, right, in the attack world. So, we're going to be a little unhinged. I love that that Halloween deal where a kid wants to go Halloween trick-or-treating and he's buck naked and holding a bottle of booze.
Yep.
And the mom says, no, you cannot go trick-or-treating as an attack helicopter pilot home on leave. I mean, that's just the connotation of who we are, right? It may not be true, but anyway, it's how we roll. So
beautiful.
I come along and I wasn't a great student, and I wanted to take Dad's job. I mean, that was the sole focus. Mom was scared to death that being a tractor driver was my life ambition. And then when we move over to I want to fly helicopters, she was no more enamored with that.
Tractors.
Yeah. You can't keep her happy at that point. I had a mother like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I go to Air Force ROTC and I come up a half inch short in the sitting height to be a pilot. This is winter quarter. And they offered me missile operator deal, which, I mean, who amongst us wants to do that job?
Well, you must be this tall to ride this jet. Come on, man.
Yeah. No, that sounds stupid.
I'm sure, when they were measuring and I didn't know what they were measuring, I probably was just kind of slumped over. I could have found a half an inch. But
sure.
Regardless,
yeah. Easy.
Here we go. And there's no way in the world I'm going to sit in a missile silo because I can't sit still anyway. And I wander over to Army ROTC, but in the middle of this, I'm telling Camille what I'm doing. And when I literally brought up that I want to be a military pilot, she burst into tears in her dorm room. And I'm thinking,
these are tears of joy or tears of fear? What?
No, tears of fear. And I wasn't expecting that. So the Air Force thing doesn't work out. And the only reason I was in Air Force because my dad was a P-51 and F-86 crew chief in Korea. So Air Force was a natural draw.
Sure.
I go over to Army ROTC, and they not only are interested, but kind of lay out the path of how to become an Army aviator. And it all boiled down to what we know as the Order of Merit list. So you have to be a top performer. And I will say that Dad's development of me on that farm and everything he taught me, he never used the word task condition standard. But if you looked at anything we did on the farm, that's how you execute it. So I was kind of hunting on a baited field at that point.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So let's I want to back up just a second because so military service in your family. Your uncle, World War II, or was it your great uncle or your uncle?
They were my uncles. My dad's brother served under Patton in World War II.
Okay.
And I knew that. And my Aunt Betty Ann, who I mentioned in the book, who was Daddy's paddlemeister, if he got in trouble, it was his sister, Aunt Betty Ann, that would spank him. Her husband also served in World War II. So we had a lineage, but it wasn't something the family rallied around. It was Dad never talked about it. In fact, Jay interviewed him in high school about his service in Korea. And Daddy had a box full of pictures of him being a crew chief. I never knew he earned the Bronze Star. And I just, in his death, found his citation. And Dad broke an Air Force record. He had his plane in the air flying sorties for 8.5 hours on one mission, and they had no hangars in Korea. Now I know why he had frostbite feet. All of these things come out through the, you're pulling it, right? Because
boy, that is such a common theme. That how many people, pass and then their family finds their war service records and all that.
Yeah.
Actually, do you have that citation handy?
It is at the frame shop right now because it's so brittle. I've got a picture of the colonel pinning the Bronze Star on Dad's uniform. And I've got the citation and everything associated with it. I knew I was close when I found the cover for the Bronze Star, the box.
Right.
I found the top in one of Dad's junk drawers, and I knew I was close. And about
those boxes laying all around here.
Yeah, right. I found the original Bronze Star.
Not mine, but I got them laying around here.
Ain't that something?
Yeah, here it is.
Awesome.
Yeah. It was such a cool thing. And I brought it back from Georgia a week ago, and I took it to a frame shop and delicately rolled it out because, this is brittle paper.
Right. 70 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
So once it's done, if you could send me a photo of that, we'll put it up on your episode's blog post entry.
Would love to.
Okay. I got follow-on questions. Yeah. I'm writing questions fast while you're talking. Okay. So where did the flying bug come from? Why aviation? Why did you want to fly? Did you get a flight somewhere? Did you have a...
Yeah, my brother was a private pilot. So with that distance of him being 9 years older, when I was a kid, I would go get it. He had a little Cherokee single engine plane, and I'd go get in the plane with him and go flying. And when the agriculture thing started falling off, and I got to tell you, too, the other part that's really disturbing to me is my friends were graduating 2 years ahead of me with a 4-year degree in agribusiness or whatever, and they were making the same money that you would make at the trailer plant in Plains, And I thought, why did I go to school for 4 years to not have anything better than this to offer to Camille or to the family? So you wanted to be something better. So I pretty much fell back on what did you want to do, where your interests lie, and the aviation bug my brother had set. Now, additionally, this is pretty cool. My sister Linda worked at Peterson Field, which was a little grass strip about 5 miles from our house in Plains, and Mr. Peterson was flying Jimmy Carter around to events all around the country. So my sister's working out there. Robert Redford came in. A bunch of actors would fly into that grass strip to come meet with the future president. And my sister was on taxi orders, so she could taxi planes around and things. So it was more or less set in motion, and I didn't know it. But the moment I started struggling with what I want to do, I thought, I kind of like flying. And it wasn't the helicopter part, too, was at 12 when President Carter becomes president. He flies into Warner Robins Air Force Base in the 747, and guess how he gets to Plains, which is in the middle of nowhere, on Marine One. And coming in Marine One is, the Beast, the presidential vehicle on a Chinook. So they're coming right over our house, inbound to land, and I would jump on my bicycle and ride over to the ball field about the time the blade stopped turning, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So when the Air Force didn't work out, can't be a fighter pilot like you two guys, then, because I'm too short. Now but I really like those helicopters, and they're cool. And the Army's got a ton of helicopters. So they laid the path out for me, and I really go into a lot of detail in the book about what that looked like. Right. People that I wanted the theme to be to praise others. I hope you guys got that as you read the book.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing negative in that book. It's all about these people that came into my life and into Jay's life that were positive influences. And I hope that set the tone
I don't know. There was some negative about some major over in Iraq, if I recall. Saudi Arabia.
Not just
We'll get
that
there
one
from here.
part.
All right.
One
But we'll
part.
come. We'll come back to that. Let's come back to that. Hold on to that.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
people can be a positive influence or a negative influence. So you want to surround yourself with people that are helping bring you up, not bring you down.
So can you just touch on? There was a significant amount of risk and uncertainty when you said Army ROTC because they didn't give you an aviation contract. You had
No.
right? So let's talk. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and it was true for Jay as well, and he can put the exclamation point on it.
Please do, gentlemen.
Does the Order of Merit list? I had to first of all go to this camp at Fort Knox to make up for my freshman and sophomore year, the first 2 years of ROTC, because I didn't do it. And they told me when I went that you need to do well, but they didn't really lay it all out. They said you need to do well. You can qualify for a 2-year Army ROTC scholarship, but it is kind of the starting point to getting aviation branch if you want to do it. But there's no promise. And if you don't get what you're going to get, you get to pick 2 or 3, 4 branches of the Army. And let's just talk about the grunts first, an 11 Bravo, infantry. I had no interest in that, but everything we did was infantry. So I had to fake it till I made it. But
right.
Sounds like the Marine Corps, Fig.
It does sound an awful lot like
Rifleman first.
Right. Yeah.
So, I knew how to shoot. I knew pretty much how to navigate through the woods. I knew a lot of the basic fundamentals. And having real Army drill sergeants in my life that summer at Fort Knox just set me up for the rest of the evaluative period over the next 2 years. So I was fortunate that I had some really great NCOs. Sergeant Major Byram, I talk about in the book where the word Flanagan comes from. I'm sure you guys picked up on that. I don't want to give away what that means, but he was all up in our business, and it was a rough time with that guy. And I liken it to the movie We Were Soldiers, when the little private's coming down the sidewalk. Every time he meets the sergeant major, he nearly wets his pants, right?
Right.
I was like, how the hell do you know what kind of day it is, Private? It was Sergeant Major Byron was that guy. And then they turned the University of Georgia Bulldog strength coach loose on us. His name was Coach Mervos, and he was exalted, to say the very least, but he had a lisp, and that's one of the funny moments in the book. When I talk about Sergeant or Coach Mervos would be screaming at us with a lisp, and if we we laughed, we were disrespecting him. But you're the worst group of cadets I've ever seen, and he was a big dude, and we were just sit there, you can't laugh at this guy. He had us running the University of Georgia Sanford Stadium bleachers and steps till we threw up just about every day of the week. But we were mean and ready to go. So. Yeah, I had to finish in the top of my class. I also had to, as Jay did as well, we had to pass the flight aptitude test, finish in the top of the class, and then the physicals. I know everybody on the aviation side listening to this know about military flight physicals. And until you get in and start flying, you are subject to any little thing, you're out.
Oh, yeah.
It's a weeding out process, really. I'll find, if there's too many guys in the pipeline, well, they seem to find lots of things wrong with guys.
Yeah. I forgot to mention that, Fig. We're in the presence of those 2 guys,
And the day after
class leaders, the number 1 guys, those guys.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The glasses supposedly got me. That's why they pulled my flight contract. Was my vision. 20/20 -3 because I couldn't see 3 Scrabble letters out of 32 across a darkened room. But, in one eye.
I think they've changed the rules now. But the funny
you get LASIK now.
The funny part about the Army ROTC thing from Jay's perspective, and I'll let him tell this, but I wanted him to go Air Force ROTC, and I'll tell you why. And I told him this, guys.
Well, you didn't want him to go in the military?
No, well, that's right.
He's laughing already because I had been on King Fahd Airport in Saudi Arabia, and this story's not in the book, but we're on King Fahd Airport, and the 101st Airborne, that when I was taking an in-country swap out of 26 ECAS Cobras for 26 fully modernized Cobras, we're sleeping on a parking deck on King Fahd Airport, my mechanics, my test pilots, all of our guys, for about 2.5 months, scared to death that a Scud missile's going to hit us. They're contracting labor to build the airport. Well, the Air Force is on the other side of the airport. 101st Airborne Army's on one side, Air Force is on the other. And one of my crew chiefs comes up to me and goes, "Hey, LT, I heard they've got a mess hall over there, like real food, because we're eating tea rations." And I said, "Man, you think? Well, they got air-conditioned tents. If we're here and they got a chow hall, why would you not believe that? And we're wearing flight suits. What do you think?" And I totally am reading this kid's mind. I go, "Okay, we're going.
Let's go."
We go across, walk into their chow hall. They've got a salad bar.
Yeah.
Air-conditioned tent, salad bar, and right across the runway, we're eating tea rations out of a freaking can.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm telling Jay this stuff. I'm like, dude, the good news about helicopters is you can land them anywhere. The bad news is you can land them anywhere, which means you're sleeping in the swamp.
Anywhere.
You're sleeping in the dirt.
Yeah.
Fixed wing guys have to have a runway. So I think I've got him all set, to have a better life than I did in the Army or certainly the Marines. Go Air Force ROTC. So I take him over to Georgia, and this is what happens.
Yeah. So, Jay, tell us how you failed life's IQ test and went.
Did you not listen to anything your father said?
So we went to UGA. We were doing a campus tour visit, and we had 2 appointments because I had been pre-awarded an Air Force scholarship and an Army scholarship. So I was going there to interview and figure out which way to go. And we went in to meet with one of the junior PMSs, the professor of military science, and he straight up, I can't remember his name, but he absolutely told us almost verbatim, "I'm a USAFA grad, do not want to be here. I got kind of forced to come over here." And, he didn't sell the program at all. And I saw some of their cadets, and they did not impress at all. Very few of them were trying to become pilots. Most of them were trying to get into other jobs. So it didn't really feel like a community or a high-performing one, especially. And then we went across the street to the military science building where the Army ROTC department was. And there were people out back doing pull-ups, climbing ropes. The recruiting operations officer was 3 bags full, excited, talking about all the program opportunities and everything that there was to do. And that pretty much clinched it. And I was like, I have no business being over there with those guys. Like, this is where you need to be.
There was another part that you may not remember, but when we got there, they met him outside. They knew we were coming, and the administrative director that was there when I was a cadet was still there, and she had my file. So she's standing on the porch at the military science building, meets us coming up, and she looks at him and she said, "Jeff Moss Jr., we want you here in Army ROTC. If you want to look at your dad's file, here it is."
That's private.
Yeah, Diane Perry. Yeah, she retired the year before I graduated, but she got me through 75% of it. She's an awesome lady.
And they named the admin section of the Army ROTC military building at the University of Georgia after Miss Diane Perry. It was such a this versus that. And I'm thinking the whole time when I saw her standing on the steps when we were walking up, I'm going, he's going Army ROTC, it's over, because that guy really messed it up. And here we are. So what's been your experience? You've been sleeping in the dirt?
Oh, I've been colder than I thought possible on a number of occasions, but I mean, we've innovated. My first sergeant in the 101st came up with a great idea. We had a weed sprayer, and he brought a propane tank and like a seafood boil tank out into the field. So we would heat water up in that and pour it into the weed sprayer and pump it up, and you could have, a decently hot shower experience in the field. But we've made do, and I've had so much fun doing it. It's been an awesome experience.
Adapt and overcome. So how long have you been active now?
9 years.
9. All right. Thinking of staying?
Well, I just doubled down to do another 4. So going back to the 101st when this assignment's over, and looking forward to it. I love the 101st. It's hands down been my favorite assignment so far. And
Nice.
I'm looking forward to getting back to it.
Nice. Okay. And you're a captain now?
I am.
Okay. Nice. And
Wait, what's the best rank in the Army? Officer. What's the best?
I would say captain is, honestly, I love being a PL. It's nice to get in the driver's seat a little bit, and I would say, as long as you manage your relationships appropriately and you take care of people, you can do some really awesome stuff with a team. And I think when I look back on my career thus far, the things that I've done as a member of a team, it's nothing that I did by myself, but it's my contributions and the contributions of other rowing together in the same direction. We've been able to do some pretty insanely awesome and impressive feats over the last 9 years.
Spoken like a true leader there, Captain. Well said.
yeah.
I agree. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Fig, that one of the questions that Repeat said is, we're going to see a fight between them as to who's the best pilot. I have said from day one, Jay has surpassed me in every facet. Academically, he's a heck of a pilot. He's a heck of a leader. And that's what every father should want for their child. Excel, do better than me. And he has done that. He was never a problem. And I think the maturity that he gained was having to grow up with a very sick sister that's 3 years older than him. He was forced into maturity long before he should have been.
That's when I told you at the beginning, folks, about the overwhelming challenges that this family faced. That's part of it. I'll tell you what. Let's take a moment and we will thank the people who made this episode possible. So there I was, flying high, thinking my retirement was locked in, running smooth, no adjustments needed. Then it hit me. Retirement planning isn't something you can just put on autopilot. You can't just set it and hope for the best. If you're not actively steering, you could be drifting off course without even realizing it. That's why pilots who get it turn to HSI Wealth Strategies. These guys aren't your typical financial advisors. They're pilots. Military, airline, guard, civil. They've sat where you're sitting. They understand the unique financial landscape pilots face, from high earning years to the minefield of taxes and inflation waiting down range. And here's the kicker. On average, they're saving pilots $1 million or more just by making smart course corrections. The earlier you start working with them, the more opportunities they have to reduce your lifetime tax burden and keep more of your hard-earned money where it belongs. But don't worry, even if you're closer to your Centrum Silver years, they have the expertise to help make the most of your approach to retirement. Now, let me ask you something. If your airplane was leaking fuel mid-flight, would you ignore it and hope you still had enough to make it to your destination? Of course not. You'd act immediately. Your retirement is no different. If you're not taking control now, you could be watching your hard-earned money evaporate through unnecessary taxes and inefficient planning. And listen, we all know the classic joke. How does a pilot make $1 million? Well, he starts with $2 million and manages it himself for 6 months. Funny? Yes, but humor has truth to it, and this one is painfully true. So here's your wake-up call. This is your moment right now. You have a choice. You can keep hoping your retirement lands smoothly, or you can take action and get a real strategy from people who know exactly what it takes to make it work for pilots. Call Robbie Walling at 214-538-7030. That's 214-JET-7030. Or email robert.walling@nm.com. That's robert.walling, WALLING, at novembermike.com. Because when it comes to your financial future, you only get one final approach, and there are no go-arounds. HSI Wealth Strategies. Pilots guiding pilots to a smooth landing in retirement. I'll be honest, sometimes I'd rather just stay hungry than figure out how to throw together a meal. And when I finally cave, my creativity usually maxes out at a PB&J, some chips, and a glass of milk. Sound familiar? No judgment, we've all been there. Between work, family, and everything else, cooking can feel like just another chore. But what if you could have amazing home-cooked meals that are just as easy, taste incredible, and you actually save money? That's where Every Plate comes in. We tried the pork tacos with pineapple salsa. Wow. Just wow. Amazing. And the beef banh mi bowl? Fantastic food that I would have thought beyond my meager culinary skills. Look, I've eaten my fair share of boring, uninspired meals. Everybody has. But Every Plate actually makes dinner exciting again. Their recipes are delicious, simple, and quick, with new options every week. Let me say that part again. Delicious, simple, and quick. These really are easy-to-prepare meals. I was pleasantly surprised at the simplicity. And Every Plate also offers Calorie Smart, Carb Smart, and Protein Smart meals. And if you're looking to tweak things even more, their Smart Swaps let you ditch the tortillas for lettuce wraps, swap out rice for cauliflower rice, or switch potatoes for sweet potatoes. And the best part? It costs less than groceries. According to the USDA, the average monthly grocery bill for an individual is about $504, which breaks down to roughly $16.80 a day. Meanwhile, Every Plate meals start at just $4.99 per serving, which means you're getting high-quality homemade meals for a fraction of what you'd spend at the grocery store. You skip the store, skip the stress, and still get wholesome, delicious meals without breaking the bank. Seriously, their prices are amazing, and the convenience quotient makes this an off-the-charts good deal. So, there I was, thinking I hated cooking. Turns out, I just needed better meal options with simple instructions. And voila, I am eating great food, and I don't have to sit there uninspired. Start with 50% off your first box with code STIW50 at everyplate.com/podcast. Every Plate offer valid with auto-renewing subscription. That's code STIW50, Sierra, Tango, India, Whiskey, 50 at everyplate.com/podcast. Friends, I'm asking you to please check this one out. I really believe you'll love this deal. Every Plate, delicious, simple, and quick. Thanks to Every Plate for sponsoring this episode. So, thank you indeed for bringing these stories to everyone. We're honored and humbled that you have chosen to sponsor us. So, yeah, you talked about forced maturity, and I look at some times in my life that forced me to grow up. As we've talked pre-show, I've experienced some of my own family difficulties at given times in my life. Well, the one thing I learned is there's nothing more difficult or challenging than to see your child suffering and to stand by helpless to do anything about it. So let's go into that just a little bit and tell us, what it is you were facing. And I'm fuzzy on my math here. Was that had not started when you were getting ready to kick off the war that you talked about in your opening story,
what
right?
Had happened then? So I had headed from El Paso, Texas to Fort Eustis, Virginia to attend the maintenance test pilot course. And as I'm driving, Iraq has invaded Kuwait, and I'm listening to it on the radio. When I because again, I have to tell people, this was 1989, 1990. There were no cell phones at this juncture.
Right.
We had pagers. So I'm not communicating with my wife en route, the 2-day trip to make that run, because it takes 24 hours to drive across, or 12 hours to cross Texas.
Yeah.
I get to Eustis, and I call back, and my wife said, I think they're going to call you back. And I said, why? She said, the cab is railheading, which means they're loading up the tanks and all that kind of thing. And I literally said out loud, and this is one of those comments that will live in infamy, I said, they will send the Girl Scouts before they send the 4th of the 3rd ACR, which was my unit, the Long Knife Squadron. And I was right in what I said at the time, because they had just stood up the Air Cav Squadron about a year and a half earlier. We didn't have aircraft up. We had a horrible safety record just due to all the issues that were going on. There was a whole lot of stuff going on. One of my pilots had gotten killed due to a compressor stall that led to number 2 drive shaft failure, that they crashed and he didn't survive the crash. There were a lot of reasons I said that.
Yeah.
Well, 2 weeks later, and she's pregnant with Mallory. So we had made arrangements for her to come to Eustis and deliver Mallory. I get called back. My commander, Captain Lou Huzella, called me and goes, I didn't want to do this, but man, we're going. And I couldn't believe it. So I load my truck up and I'm driving all the way back across the country to El Paso. Mallory is due any day. This was October of 1990. And my commander, Colonel George Webb, came to me and he goes, I want you to be the rear detachment officer. About 3 years ago, he said, hey, part of it was I wanted you to see Mallory be born, but the truth of the matter is you were the best guy I had to do what I needed done. So he chose me to be the rear detachment, bring up the last airplane guy.
Yep.
And it was hopes that Mallory be born. Well, Camille's overdue by a week. So Mallory is born on October the 11th. In the evening, I get on the plane after lunch on the 13th. So I've got basically a day and a half with them in the hospital. But I have to tell you, thank God I saw my child born. Many have not. They've gotten the telegram or now the satellite call. Right. Now they can do it on video. But we didn't have that capability then. So I head over for Desert Storm and the opening of the show. So there I was. We had jumped, the air war had started, and we had jumped from the middle of the desert of Saudi Arabia somewhere to right on the Iraqi border at Tactical Assembly Area Cactus. I got called to a tent, and when I walked in there, Colonel Webb, Lou Huzella, and my first sergeant were sitting there along with Chaplain Jim Malden. And I'm scared to death. I said, what's going on?
Yeah, right.
And they said there's been an incident at Fort Bliss, and I'm thinking, something's happened to Camille or Mallory.
Yeah,
and
you don't bring the chaplain in for.
Yeah, exactly.
I
was petrified, and I said, just tell me, cut to the chase. And somebody, when my wife got home from the hospital, and this had been 2 months later, somebody started calling my wife the night the air war started, and it was harassing phone calls. That I know your husband's in Desert Storm. I know you're home alone. All of that.
Oh, my gosh.
And they said, your father-in-law has flown to El Paso. He's got your wife and Mallory, and they're headed back to Georgia. They're safe. So there I was, sitting on the Iraqi border. The ground war is imminent, and I feel completely powerless and helpless. That was the start of God telling me I've got this. I mean, it's hard for me to talk about now. I get emotional.
Yeah.
God started.
Get it.
Yeah.
Then you don't need to worry. I've got them. So move forward. We get through Desert Storm, and I come home. We have gotten out of the military. We have moved to a town called Macon, Georgia. Mallory's 5. Jay has been born. He's now 2. And Mallory has a seizure on a Sunday afternoon when I'm headed out the door to go practice with the praise and worship band at church. And literally, for folks that don't understand seizures, Mallory's first seizure that we saw was a full-on grand mal. And not knowing much about epilepsy at that moment, when somebody has a severe grand mal seizure, they go into what's called a post-ictal phase, which means their breathing is very shallow, they're resting, their body's trying to more or less recover from the seizures. Literally, guys, I thought she was dead. When the paramedics and the fire department showed up after Camille called 911, I was holding her on the floor, sobbing because I literally thought she was dead. Now, Jay's a 2-year-old, and he's not knowing what the world's going on. The fire department showed up first. They said, "Sir, she's got a faint pulse. She's alive. Let me have her." And I'm looking up like, I think she's deceased. So I let them have her. Long story short, that was the first seizure that led to us going up to 150 to 200 a day, and Mallory becoming what was known as an atypical Lennox-Gastaut child. Now, just understand that up until she's 5, Mallory was already reading on a 3rd grade level. She could name the continents. She was super intelligent. So this totally took the carpet out from under us. She went into status epilepticus multiple times, which is one seizure after another without recovery. It's a medical emergency, and a lot of epileptics die from this. We've been in the hospital for a month on end, and there's a story here that I really want to get on this podcast. I didn't put it in the book, or it got pulled out, but it's going to be part of the follow-on. We've been in a hospital. I'd been brand new to Pfizer. I hadn't worked for the company very long, and my regional manager shows up on a Sunday morning. He stuck his head in the door, and the cool thing about this guy is he's a Vietnam veteran bird dog pilot. So his name's John Strange. I love him. I can't begin to tell you how much I love this guy. He sticks his head in the door and gives me the come here. And I walked out in the hallway, and he said, "How you holding up?" And I told him the truth. You know, we don't know what's going on, Mallory. They're telling us this is really bad. I don't know. And he goes, "Is there anything you're concerned about?" And I said, "Well, John, I've only got 2 weeks vacation, and we've been in the hospital already almost 2 weeks. I don't know what to do." And he looked at me, guys, and you talk about leadership. He looked at me and goes, "Jeff, this isn't vacation. This is hell on earth. When you're able to get back in the field and go to work, you let your district manager know. She will tell me, but right now you take care of Mallory."
Wow.
I mean, stop the press. He totally relieved my anxiety about my job and about work. And Pfizer was consistent with me throughout her entire illness like that.
Wow.
3 or 2 brain surgeries. We were in the hospital for a month and a half, 2 months at the time. And the company stood behind me. Now, I got to tell you, Family Medical Leave Act comes up and all the HR stuff you've got today. I feel sorry for parents going through illnesses with their children, because now the way HR systems work and the way regulations go, that probably doesn't happen. It's take FMLA. Well, that saves your job, but it doesn't pay your bills.
Right.
You know, it's really sad. So in the middle of all of this trauma that's going on in our world is little Jay. And Camille's mom and dad pretty much moved in with us. Between her mom and dad, which did the lion's share of heavy lifting, and my parents, Jay got raised by his grandparents for better part of 5-6 years while we searched the globe trying to get help for our daughter, for Mallory. And, you know, I really felt bad about that, but I couldn't do anything about it. So we're traveling all over the country trying to get her seizures stopped and trying to get her care. And poor Jay is in the middle of it. And I got to tell you, we're holding our breath, waiting on him to turn 5. Hoping that, because all they could say is maybe this is genetic. They never could find
right.
Yeah. So we're holding our breath. Oh my God. Is Jay going to be okay? And obviously he turned out better than normal and super smart and super capable and has never had a seizure. Thank God. But we, early on in this, everything I'd been taught by my dad, by the military, task, condition, standard. Mallory did not fall into a playbook. There was no guidelines. There was no path to getting her better. And I didn't know what to do. I'm used to a checklist, y'all.
Yeah.
All of us aviators. We go to chapter 5 for, limitations. We go to chapter 9 for emergency procedures. We're skilled and trained in simulators. Yeah. And we have no idea what to do when the engine quits and you don't have a procedure. And I liken it back to Apollo 13. You know, when they said, "I need you to make a filter out of this. This is all they've got." That's kind of where we were at that point, and we didn't know what to do.
So you guys at one point, you talk about it in the book, were told that she had, Jay, I want to talk to you in a second here about your memories of this and feelings, but I want to get a little further into, you were told that she might have a year to live at best at one point.
Yeah. It was a Sunday morning and a neurologist walked in the hospital room and essentially just nonchalantly said, "Your daughter's got a degenerative brain disease and she's either going to be fully retarded or dead in a year." And it took a minute for that to sink in on me.
Good Lord.
And it was, that little major that we talked about, the negative part of the book. Again, conditioning. God put people in my life and he conditioned me to deal with stuff. And within 30 seconds of hearing that, I looked at him and I said, "Then we need a second opinion. Discharge us from this hospital and send us somewhere else. Tell us where to go." He literally said, "We have the best neurologist in the country here." And that means you're sucking all the air, oxygen out of the air. You're taking away our hope. And I said, well, my next statement to him was, I don't believe that's what God intended for our child. And we got her out of the hospital, and I'm in Macon, Georgia. And to this day, I go back to this doctor named Sadir Anthony. I was in pharmaceutical sales, so I'm calling on a neurologist. And everybody in town knew what was going on with Mallory. I mean, they were praying for us, felt sorry for us. It was all of that. But I couldn't go to work without 12 times a day telling people how she was doing. Well, this neurologist said, how you doing? And I told him the truth. And he said, what can I do to help you, Jeff? And I said, God, Dr. Anthony, I don't know, but you're a neurologist. If this is your child, what would you do? And he sat there and he thought about it for a second. He turned around to his, library behind him, and he pulled a textbook off, and it was written by a doctor from the Cleveland Clinic. Her name's Dr. Wiley. And he goes, this lady writes the textbooks on epilepsy. I would find a way to get my child in front of Dr. Wiley. So needless to say, by now cell phones work. I'm out in the parking lot calling my colleagues in Cleveland, Ohio. Who knows Dr. Wiley, and can we get an appointment? And within 48 hours, again, Jay's with his grandparents who have moved in with us. We're on the way to Cleveland, Ohio with Mallory, and Dr. Wiley evaluated her and said it's not a degenerative brain disease, but it's not good. She has atypical Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. And of course, you go, well, what is that? Mallory's a 3%er. 97% of Lennox-Gastaut kids are born completely debilitated in a wheelchair. They can't, they're non-functional. 3% with Lennox-Gastaut are like Mallory, super smart, horrible epilepsy, difficult to control seizures, but they're semi-functional. And that leads to a whole nother arena of the book. But I know you want to ask Jay about where he is in all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, Jay, so what's your first memory of this? And at any point, you're described well in the book, but you didn't write the book. At any point, are you just really frustrated? Or did you view this as, like, for instance, I'll give you a quick personal experience on this. My parents divorced when I was very young. At the time, it was hard, but I look back on it as forced maturity, and I've since regressed from that. But the forced maturity, I thought was a blessing and a good thing in my life. So where were you on that? At any point, did you regret or get angry about this? And because that's normal if you did, right? So
I would say that I don't recall feeling very frustrated. My grandparents took very good care of me. Carter and Glenda Morton, my mom's parents, basically moved in with us, and they were taking me to school, cooking meals, playing with me, and all these kinds of things. And then I was going back and forth between them and Mima and Peepaw, my dad's parents. What I recall was more of the terror, I guess, because it was like Dad described, it was pretty horrifying, and now we barely react to it at this point, 33 years later for Mom and Dad, and 31 years later for me. Like, Mary still has seizures, very few compared to when she was a child, but we don't even, it doesn't even get in, But at the time, one of the things he didn't describe, but I have to kind of say, like, there's a sort of a horror aspect to it, because when someone has a grand mal seizure, typically there's a convulsive sort of head banging motion forward. It's very violent. It happens immediately. It's a sucker punch every time that it happens. And it seemed like with Mallory, every fourth or fifth time that it happened, she would be facing a granite countertop or the edge of a table or something like that. And knocked her front teeth out, gashing her eyebrow, her head, and and bleeding profusely all over the place. So she's coming out of a seizure and is covered in blood or in extreme pain from losing her two front teeth and screaming, and then there was one period too, because the other fun part about this whole journey, in my teenage years, there was a brief period where the chemical cocktail that she was under in her drug formula that was keeping her stable all of a sudden wasn't really working that well anymore. She had an uptick in seizures. And the worst part of that was that it made her hallucinate the most nightmarish scenarios, like having snakes crawling all over her, insects all over her skin. And she could see them, but we couldn't. Right. And that was a major thing. But as far as the forced maturity, I mean, it was a little tough growing up. Other kids didn't understand me, I think, looking back on it a lot. And we were still moving around here and there a little bit. So I could not communicate with them the way they communicated with each other. And I mean, that led to a lot of bullying and stuff. You're like, that dude is weird. And I, as an adult looking back on it, I can totally understand why, they probably did what they did or thought what they did. But, as a young kid and stuff, like, that was difficult. Yeah. I felt like practically nobody liked me, but, I did in high school, I was lucky to have some friends that were more mature by that point. And one of my best friends, Mac Baggerly, I kind of was in a similar scenario going into middle school, high school, but he and I played rec ball together in Forsyth, and he was one of the first, like, no matter what was going on, he stuck with me. We're still good friends today, but, it wasn't like that up until that point. I mean, up until that point, it was just, I mean, how do you communicate? Because most people, like most people don't experience that kind of stuff, and it changes who you are and how you behave, I think, fundamentally, and it kind of gets irretractably tied up into your persona. And I'll just say this to kind of tie it off, but one of the things that I realized too, and Dad can touch on as well, I don't want to name drop anybody, but, we thought Mallory had it bad, but by virtue of being in a neurology ward and seeing what was going on in some of those other hospital rooms, we weren't that bad off by comparison. And it's just perspective changes everything, and, you think you've got it bad until you see what's going on next door. Yeah, absolutely.
You walk down the street, and I talk about it a lot in the book because I think through God's providence, He puts people in your path that might actually make you feel kind of lucky. And in the worst moments in the hospital, when, I would be feeling really down, and Camille and I were never down at the same time. If I was up, she was down, and vice versa. So I think that's part of God's plan. But I found myself up on the cancer ward one night with a bunch of parents that were facing life and death. And we had come to the realization that although Mallory's life wasn't great, we knew she wasn't going to pass away typically. Some epileptics do, but we had a fighting chance here of getting her well. But you wind up on the cancer ward or with the Gendels, and it's okay to drop their name. They're in the book. This couple raised a child that was born with cerebral palsy and had to have 100% care from the day he was born till the day he died, a little past 21. And I talk about in the book going through a phase of being angry with God. And that when I say angry with God, I mean, I didn't understand His will. You had shown me the path. I took it. Everything seemed to work out. But here's my child. What have I done to bring this on my family? What awful thing have I been as a human being? Because we were Christians. We were raised in the church. I believed in God fervently. And, that's really a bad place to be mentally. And I talk about that, but also talk about the chaplain that helped me through it at the hospital in Hackensack. But this is real world stuff that parents go through every single day when their child is suffering, and they wonder, what did I do to bring this on them? And God really doesn't work like that. And I hope that folks that read the book will walk away with that message that things can be really horrible and bad, but God's there for you. And I had a friend that that lost his daughter in a car accident, and he turned away from God. And I reached out to a close friend and said, I don't know what to say to him. And he said, bottom line is the child died as a Christian, and they're in heaven with Jesus right now. Do they want their legacy to be that in their death you turned away from God and you forgot everything that you taught them as a dad raising them? That's easy to say.
I would say, too, that one thing that I've had to come to peace with is that if you're a religious person, if you're a person of faith, you know, some people say, like, well, you can't get angry with God. And I personally, I don't know if I'm right for saying this, but you absolutely
the hell you
can. You absolutely
oh, my
can.
Beer. Yeah.
And that's okay. I think the only thing that's not okay is to stay there. And I mean, even most recently, I got angry with God in January, you know, so just talking about Peepaw's passing again, just briefly, but, you know, there's two things that Peepaw, especially in his later years, that he had an issue with, and he hated being cold, and he hated sticks. Like Dad was saying, he hated sticks and leaves in the yard because he didn't like it. He felt that it was unprofessional and looked sorry.
Like a golf course.
Yeah, he did. And, you know, Dad and I talked about this, but, you know, in his dementia, what actually happened was he got up in the middle of the night, which had never happened the entire time that he was in care. And his hands had drawn up, so he didn't have a lot of fine motor skills anymore, but he made his way outside in January. It was 18 degrees outside. And essentially he got hypothermic and he passed. And initially, my issue working through that was that, you know, my grandfather, 94 years, a servant to Christ and his community. He never hurt anybody. He never withheld anything from anyone. And, you know, it was difficult to work through that somehow his reward for all of that was to freeze to death. And I was very angry. But where I eventually got to, though, because I was seriously, I got the news. He hadn't passed quite yet. There's a brief period where, you know, he was trying to be stabilized in the hospital. And I jumped in my truck and I was speeding down to Plains trying to get there to catch him before he passed. And I just I was like, why? How is that just, you know? And the reality of it is that life just doesn't work that way. It's not just necessarily. And I kind of rationalized my way through it. I think that to a degree, I think he actually somewhat had a moment of clarity, and he knew that Mima wasn't doing very well. She still isn't at this point. And I think some part of him somewhere got up, and he was a man of action his whole life, you know, and he took action and he went to prepare the way. That's how we choose to look at it ourselves. Yeah. But you can apply that to everything. And, you know, that's where that's the plan. That's at least the plan that how I'm trying to view it and how I'm trying to perceive it. But it can be hard to see that in the midst of extreme grief or pain. You know, sure. It doesn't come across. It's very hard to see any kind of clarity or any rhyme or reason to it. It just seems mean.
Well, let me offer this because I'm such a wise person. Just ask me. God made us. God gave us those emotions, and He understands them better than we ever will. So our anger at Him is probably almost amusing, and I don't mean that in a flippant way. I mean it's like it's what He made us, and so
this isn't your typical podcast, guys.
No, it isn't.
It's not.
Which go ahead, Fig.
I got a lot of questions still about flying.
Yeah. That's where I wanted to go. Cause I think we talked earlier pre-show about bringing your bride Camille on and talking about what military families go through. We've reached out a couple times to different spouses because that's a big part of it, the military. And I try to always thank the veterans, the active duty, and the families who help the veterans in active duty do what they do. And so we'll focus some more on that. But the other thing I'd like to get into is, Jay, there's a picture of you here at, I think, 7. You got your first. How many 7-year-olds? No, that's not it. There it is. Thank you.
He's 12. Yeah.
There you go. Oh, 12 there. Okay, 12 years old. Well, all the 12-year-olds get to ride around in Cobras. I mean, how cool is that? So I can see why you're interested in flying by the time you got to college. I mean, you were the coffee cadet, right? Is that's what they called you?
I was. And I was going to say, I think I was 3 or 4 the first time I ever flew in a helicopter, and it was over Niagara Falls. And I kind of, as I alluded to, as a child, I used to have a lot of fear, and I think some of that might have been just the environment that I was in. Sure. I was freaked out about stuff. But what I'll say is panicking, losing it like I kind of always did before the skids broke contact on that tour in Niagara Falls. But as soon as they did, it was like a switch flip. That's a core memory, I guess. I distinctly remember that. And I really loved it, but there's kind of a gap between that point and that photo that you just saw. And we were living in Atlanta, and, Dad had found out about the Army Aviation Heritage Foundation, and we just kind of started showing up. And initially, I think I was 8 when we first went out there. There's not much that an 8-year-old can contribute in that environment, but I could go on the coffee pot and, bring coffee around to people.
Nice.
And that wound up becoming an environment where I was mentored by arguably some of the most experienced combat helicopter pilots in the country over the next 10 years. And there were instances where I was riding around in Hueys and riding around in Cobras while I was listening to war stories and tenets of leadership that molded me into the person that I am today.
And some of them were true.
And some of them
10%.
Yeah.
Oh, I think one of the funniest stories I heard one of the pilots telling Jay was about being in Vietnam, and they went inadvertent IMC, and they thought if I let down the window in the Huey, I can stick my head out and fly, but the fog rolled into the cockpit, and I was miraculously able to land. And somebody said, well, how did you do it? And this was a grown-up that actually said that to the guy. He was making a joke with Jay. He goes, I broke out the glass in the flight instruments and landed by braille, right? So he could feel the artificial horizon and all that. and I thought, oh, my Lord, here we go. But there were things that I told Jay, you may hear around the hangar, don't go home and repeat in front of your mother because she'll never let you come back again. Typical aviators being aviators. But
no.
He took his first flight in a Huey with me, and there's a picture of that I think I sent you guys. It's definitely in the book. He's 8 years old, and we fly down to Vidalia, Georgia, and I'm out flying passengers in the Huey, and I come back in Atlanta. He's standing there in a flight suit. And one of the guys that flew an OH-6 in Vietnam, and that OH-6 actually was in the foundation, the same helicopter, I think at tail number 7905. And guy's name's Kurt Knapp. Kurt bought him a flight suit. And I land, and Jay's standing there in a flight suit, and I'm like, Lord, where'd you get that? Oh, Mr. Knapp bought it for me. So I try to pay Kurt back for the flight suit, and he won't take my money. He goes, he's a sky soldier. He's one of us. He needs to be in a flight suit.
Very cool.
And there's a picture of him at air shows, standing there as an 8, 9, 10-year-old child, briefing onlookers of a Cobra or a Huey, and Jay has memorized the Dash 10. He knows the limitations. He knows all the characteristics, and all the pilots are like, this is when we can sit here and chill because the kid's got it. And I've been calling him
Fantastic.
The kid, ever since then, because that's how they referred to him. So he got exposed to all of these Vietnam veterans. He got exposed to helicopter flying. So it was no shock when he's an 11th grader. He goes, Dad, I want to be an Army aviator. And as much as I tried to push him to go Air Force, I couldn't get him off of that. And frankly, we got him in. He had his private helicopter ratings and fixed wing ratings before he ever showed up at Fort Rucker, now Fort Novacell, for flight school. And he'd get in the Cobra with me, and I'd let him fly it from the front seat. And he could do it. He couldn't hover it or land it at that point, but soon after he got his private helicopter rating, I'd let him fly the Cobra with me. And that's the picture of him standing by the Cobra. He's 8 years old, and he knew everything about the weapon systems. He knew how the helmet sight subsystem worked. He knew everything. And the Cobra is pretty much
fantastic.
It's a DOS operating system in today's language. And now that he's flying the Echo model Apache version 6 with full glass cockpit, color avionics, I flew in the simulator with him at Fort Bragg 2 years ago, and I was in the front seat simulator, and the guy that Jay was flying with before I got in is telling me all the switchology. I said, dude, make the gun shoot when I pull the trigger. I mean, every glass, has buttons all the way around it. You go to this screen, that screen. I don't know that I would have made it, but the technology that he's
make this thing pilot proof, man.
Oh yeah, you were talking
trigger,
about
go bang.
Just put the thing on the thing.
Yeah. Come alongside the aircraft carrier and push a button, and the sucker will come over and land on its own.
Yeah.
I know nothing of that.
Yeah, just put the thing on the thing.
Fantastic.
So, I want to make sure everybody knows that the story ends well. Mallory had a couple of brain surgeries a year apart. She is 34 years old now. She can run a microwave oven. She can finish a puzzle on Wheel of Fortune oftentimes before we can. She seizes in her sleep, but at the worst times, guys, it was 150 seizures a day. She's in a wheelchair with her head Velcroed back so she doesn't lunge into the table and wind up in the emergency room. It was terror. And I think something that's important, when we had the last editor working on the book, guys, she honed down chapter 5, which is really all about Mallory's story. She honed it down to probably 25% of the real story. Yeah. And she told us that people can't take it. She said they will start reading chapter 5, Jeff, and they'll put the book down, and they won't know that there's a good ending. They won't know what you did after that. They won't hear about Jay becoming an Army aviator and how he turned out because they can't take it. And she was right. It's tough.
Yeah, that part of the book was tough. There was no doubt about it. And so when you told me it was cut down some, I'm like, wow, okay, I get it. But as I said in the beginning, I think there's no more helpless feeling on the planet to any human than to sit there and watch their child suffering in the hospital and be totally helpless to do anything.
It affected the family. When I got back into flying with the Army Aviation Heritage Foundation, and we've got 3 chapters. There's one in St. Louis, there's one in Mesa, Arizona, and the one in Hampton, Georgia. When I started flying again, it was me trying to get my life back in order because I knew there was this gaping hole that had left me that I had to get back so that I could be fulfilled and I could be happy. My professional career had to get turned back on. I started flying, but when I climbed in the cockpit and flew the Cobra for the first time with a Vietnam combat veteran named Judd had over 3,000 hours or more in Vietnam. It could be 5,000. I don't remember exactly, but holy smokes, I had not been taught how to really fly the Cobra until these Vietnam veterans got a hold of me in my mid-30s and said, what the heck? We were Cold War. Pop up, fire to missile, drop, move. Pop up, fire to missile, drop, move. These guys were flying close air support. They were in the middle of the fight. They were dealing with, unbelievable circumstances in Vietnam. And honestly, I didn't know how to fly the thing. When I'm in the cockpit with Judd, I thought we were going to die. And I thought all I could think about is at that first air show I flew and the first time back in the Cobra after I got out of the Army, we're going to die. I'm going to die. Camille's never going to forgive me. I'm not, she's going to curse my grave because I've left her with 2 kids because I got in the helicopter with this Vietnam guy and he crashed me. That is my favorite bird. That's Legacy 998, which is painted in Desert Storm colors and flies in honor of CW2 Rick Stroh, who was my pilot I mentioned earlier that got killed. doing gunnery tables at Fort Bliss. But Jay has flown with me in that Cobra many times, and a lot of other people. We were able to take civilians up for rides in the aircraft. And, I'm sure you guys would agree with me. When you get out of the military, the thought of flying family members in the aircraft you flew in the military is really not a plausible thought. I have flown my dad, Mallory, Camille, family members, friends, and I've taken them up and we put them through a Vietnam reenactment that's safe, but realistic. We do return to target maneuvers, high G loading maneuvers. They basically get a sense to a degree, because nobody's really shooting at you, of what the aircraft can do. But getting in that aircraft with Jay is exhilarating to no end. And now he's got his own flight folder. So Coffee Cadet at 8. Now he is a pilot with our foundation. He flew the Huey the other day for the first time with a Vietnam veteran, got checked out in the Huey, and it made my heart explode.
Oh, that's awesome.
It only can happen in America.
So you said something, and you kind of glossed over it, though, that you kind of really learned about how that Cobra could or would fly 20 years after you got out, left active duty. One, what do you think led to that? And two, I think you describe it in the book. Can you describe what was going through your mind and your heart as you're going through this the first time?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I had found out about the foundation. My neighbor in Plains, a guy named Lonnie Wise, was a Vietnam veteran. He was a member of the foundation, and he'd come over and he told me they were looking for Cobra trained helicopter pilots. And the fact that I was also a maintenance test pilot made me, I guess, a positive target for them. And the fact that I was in my late 30s or early mid 30s. Most of the guys were Vietnam era. Yeah, I mean, they're 50 and I'm 30 something. And when the founder, a guy named Mike Brady, that started the foundation, brought me in, I'm the youngest pilot they've got, and I'm fully qualified in the Cobra. I didn't have a boatload of time, but maintenance test pilot. The Army at the point that I went through was very conservative in the training we did, and it probably still is. We're not doing close air support maneuvering flight. Obviously, the Black Hawk Down scenario in Somalia had not happened. There's a lot going on later, but it's pop up, shoot, drop, move. We weren't doing return to target maneuvers. We weren't doing G-loading turns. We certainly were not banking at 90 degrees and diving and doing all kinds of that stuff. They told us no rapid input of flight controls. If you do these things, the aircraft will come apart. And I get in the cockpit with retired CW4 Vietnam hero Judd Lewis with the foundation. I've never seen him fly. I literally drove to Camden, South Carolina for this air show. They're coming into land, and I hear them, and I'm rolling down the window, hanging out the window with my tongue hanging out, right? Because the Cobra makes a distinctive sound like the hero.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And here they come in, and I'm like, holy crap, I didn't even know I was going to get to fly. But Brady wanted to set the hook in me. I get there, and they go, you're going to fly the show. You're going to ride in the front seat, in the gunner seat with Judd Lewis. Still haven't seen it, have no idea what to expect. He runs the aircraft up, takes off, and we had 2 Cobras, a couple of Hueys, and an OH-6 in this Vietnam demo scenario. Judd pulls up to a 500-foot perch, and I think, okay, nothing has happened. Well, the minute they started the show and he made his first dive in RTT, my heart rate is going through the roof, white knuckling the telescopic sight unit, thinking Camille's never going to forgive me. We're going to die. 15 minutes later, in the OH-6 being flown by a guy named Skip Lamb, he's up and all over the place. John Woodward, all of these incredible pilots. We land, and I'm almost needing a brown bag, right? Because I'm hyperventilating. I had already split the backside of my flight suit on the pre-flight. I climb out of the cockpit, slither around to Judd. I'm white as a sheet, and he looks at me and goes, "What's the matter?" I'm like, holy, you know what? I've never seen the Cobra foam like that. Thank God we didn't die. What was that? He's dumbfounded.
Yeah, he's like, what do you mean? What was what?
Yeah, he is completely What do you
That's
mean?
how we
What
do
was
it.
That?
Thought you were a combat Cobra pilot, man.
100%. But I'm a Cold War Cobra pilot.
Yeah.
So interestingly, the tactics had changed, and we seem to be behind the eight ball. I heard your podcast with the F-16 pilot. We're sitting there unloaded, and we're supposed to be first responders. That won't happen twice, but it happened. Same thing here. We go from one scenario to the next, and we're not really preparing the way we need to make sure our combat fighters are fully prepped. So as the Iraq war starts and we start losing aircraft in Iraq because they're being genteel in the way they fly the aircraft, several of our foundation members are called back to what we call Mother Rucker, the home of Army aviation, to right the ship. We have lost our close air support combat skills. And Judd and Jerry Cremitas and a number of other people I name in the book go back to Rucker and they go, the Cobra can do more because it's been phased out in 2002, but the Apache's got a fully articulated rotor system. This thing can do barrel rolls and flips. And ironically, now one of our members is a Navy Test Pilot School graduate named Mark Metzger. And Mark is a guy in the videos you see online flying the A model Apache, doing backward flips, barrel rolls, inverted flight, all of this stuff. When he gets out of the Army, he becomes a chief test pilot for Boeing in Mesa, Arizona. And this is where we have evolved to. So thankfully, Jay can do a return to target maneuver in the Apache. He can do combat maneuvering flight. But there was that little spell in early Iraq that we didn't have the skills.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
So you're sitting on the border.
Getting new airplanes.
Yeah. Waiting for this war to kick off. The war kicks off. What was the flying like for you?
It was, it was a tank war by definition at that point. I'm a maintenance guy, so I'm literally going into Iraq in a Humvee with my maintenance team in a deuce and a half. I wind up going out and having to get in a Cobra for a combat mission, but the Cobra at that point had become a secondary filler to the Apache. It was the Apache's first real war against an armored threat. It had been in Panama, and it had done some stuff, but General Dick Cody, at that point, a lieutenant colonel. If you remember, if you go back and study the Iraq War, there was a task force called Normandy. General Cody, at that point, Lieutenant Colonel Dick Cody, who became the Army Chief of Staff down the road, launches into Iraq with Apaches, and they took out the Iraqi early warning system. So the first bullets fired in Desert Storm came from several Apaches, in that they eradicated the early warning system for the Iraqi force. Task Force Normandy is declassified. There are videos out there about it. It's really cool. Interestingly, General Dick Cody's son, Colonel Clint Cody, was Jay's commander at the 101st Airborne. So we have that connectivity going all the way back. And General Cody was just famously awarded for going into Western North Carolina in his personally owned OH-6 to provide relief and support to folks that were going through stuff.
Nice.
Based on the hurricane.
That was Helene, right? Yeah, back in September. Wow.
An incredible family. They've got two Colonel Codys that are prodigy of General Cody. And I think what Jay has told me, because he spent the last 2 years in recruiting command, another void we have is legacy service, right? So you look at these families and the lineage of service members and how that trickles down. It typically starts with somebody that's the leading edge, the tip of the spear, that got the family interested in the patriotism and the value of military service. And Jay would be a third generation service member at this point.
Jay, have you got combat time?
No. I did one no-notice deployment with the 82nd. We were on immediate response force when they killed the Quds Force commander, Soleimani, in, I want to say that was the very beginning of 2020. in Iraq. And then, Iran shot ICBMs into Iraq. And when they did that, our unit activated and we kicked out. And it was one of the fastest deployments of a multifunctional aviation task force in history. It was 33 Stratair C-17s. And we basically put a miniature combat aviation brigade in Kuwait, and we're pretty much fully mission capable in about a 30 to 45 day time period. And got to do some really cool stuff. There were deck landings with the Navy in the Arabian Gulf and a lot of area support missions, because the National Guard had actually been holding down Kuwait, but they moved up into Iraq when the ICBMs were shot. And then we basically backfilled them.
Okay.
The interesting thing about that was when that happened, I was on Christmas block leave, and I got a phone call from our squadron XO, and she said, I need you to come into work. And I knew pretty much immediately it was on at that point. And then I got on a C-17 on January 19th, 2020, which was the day I turned 26. And I was in Kuwait within 48 hours, pretty much. So,
wow.
But at that time, we didn't really know what our mission was.
Sure.
But as far as we knew, we were going to combat. And that's something I think a lot of service members, not just aviators, have been through. Like when you're re-upping your mortuary affairs one more time, and you're spelling, I'm like, I really hope nobody needs this.
Right.
Writing that letter. Yeah.
Writing a letter I hope nobody ever reads.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I wrote them too, as most people do, but that's the closest I've come to anything kinetic. It's funny because I've been in the 82nd and the 101st my whole career, two of the units that deployed the most through OIF and OEF. And it was a timing thing. As soon as I left Bragg, they had been a 58 unit when I got there. We converted them to Delta models. We converted them to Echo models before I left. They decided to put them.
You're talking Apaches, right? Apache models?
Apaches, yes.
Okay.
And built up an Echo unit, did that deployment and came back, got sent to Campbell after the captain's career course. And they were on Echo V4s. And we were on IRF followed me to Campbell. So the 101st assumed it when I got there, and there was a brief period. I was actually at the Joint Readiness Training Center down in Louisiana, attached to the GSAB 6101, and
GSAB
my squadron. That's the General Support Aviation Battalion. Okay. It's all the heavy lift, all the Chinooks and stuff.
Okay.
And my squadron commander called me. He's like, my next phone call is to Colonel Espinoza, but it looks like we're getting activated. I need all my Apaches back on Campbell now. Get your stuff turned in, and get out of JRTC and get back
Russia
here.
has invaded,
and
he gets called back.
Yeah.
And we ripped out, which if anybody knows, you don't leave JRTC once it starts. Once you're in, like, nothing is going to delatch you from that except, I guess, a Russian invasion.
JRTC. Define that.
Joint Readiness Training Center.
Thank you. But so listen, we've got some listeners that have no military experience, and we love acronyms.
Yeah, we do.
So we got to define it. So thank you for that. And which JRTC are you talking about? Where was it?
That's in Louisiana.
Yes.
The other one is the NTC, National Training Center, and that's out west, and it's a desert environment. So some people say JRTC is the more favorable of the two locations, but we ripped back, and then obviously nothing happened. That
was like a month that he was on call.
Oh, and yeah, that's true.
I mean, it was that's another thing that civilians don't understand. When you've been activated like that, when you leave home in the morning and go out there to the airfield, you don't know if you're coming home.
Right.
So you get to say goodbye like 40 times.
Yeah,
we were rocking,
which is fun.
We were like 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we're gonna run, and then the difference was the Stratair never came, and that wound up not being a thing. But we wound up converting that unit to Echo V6 and built up a V6 unit. So I kind of feel
okay. Stop. Yeah. Echo V6. Help me out here.
So the Apache has gone through multiple variants at this point. It started with the alpha models. The current base model is the Echo, and there's two different versions that are running around predominantly right now. There's V4s and there's V6s, and the difference is basically just the technology that's on the aircraft, some of the capabilities that are different between the two.
The V6 is the modern variant that is like Apple's on speed. It's an Apple computer on speed.
Okay.
Total glass
It's
cockpit.
really cool. But I was just going to say, I feel like a lot of my career has been building units. That's how it kind of, and I think I bet a lot of people feel that way though, because you're building and training competency as best you can the entire time in case you need it. But that's been the extent of my career, and I've really enjoyed it. But no combat, which is
Jay, you're kind of playing this down a bit, and Dad's gonna add the color to this. He deploys over there, and they've got them flying around in the Persian Gulf around Iraqi attack vessels, and he's literally launching on and off. What was it, Jay? It was a naval vessel, but he's got carrier landings. Mm-hmm. And they're zipping around, not knowing what in the world's going to happen with the the Iranian retaliation. So they definitely have the same pucker factor any of us had that were in actual combat. And the rotor blade behind me that I know the viewers can't all see is a Cobra tail rotor blade. Jay is in the Persian Gulf at the same point in his life that I was. So this blade has got the stars and bars, but it's an actual photo of me in Desert Storm, Jay in the Persian Gulf at the same point in his career. We got the Cobra on one end and the Apache on the other. But the irony that your son is flying an attack helicopter in the same theater that you went to war.
Right.
30 years later, what are the chances?
Yeah. Well,
amazing.
Well, first of all, what are the chances? That's probably significantly minuscule, probably unmeasurable, but 30 years apart. What the hell do you think we're still doing there?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Right. Well, you should have finished it the first time, Jeff.
Thank you both for your service, by the way. I'm going to say that right now. And, Jeff, you're continuing, or Jay, your continued service. You got a ways to go if you're going to stick this out, man. Impressive family heritage there.
Thank you all for yours as well.
It all started with my dad, and that really is where the title came from. My leading edge was my dad, and he quickly showed me his leading edge, which was Christ, Jesus, and I've tried to take that forward, but I can tell you that what I lay out in the book that I hope will resonate with people is that task condition standard that we are all ingrained in as military aviators. When the engine stops, when Sully hit those birds, instinct took over. And fortunately, what Dad ingrained in me, the most important lesson of all, was to trust my family, to believe in my family, and to trust that God's got this. And I will take that forward, and I hope that Jay has learned that. I believe he has. And I hope that your listeners pick that up, that you can be the baddest of the bad attack helicopter pilots, but at the end of the day, when something's going on with your kid, it'll bring you to your knees.
Amen. Yeah.
Roger that.
About it. Wow.
We've been at this.
One last question, and it's the same question for both of you because people are going to like this answer. I don't know the answer to the first person I'm going to ask it to, but I do know the answer to the second one, and it's cool. Who pinned on your second lieutenant bars, Jay? Who commissioned you?
I was commissioned by Peyton DeHart. He gave me my oath. I mean, my parents and my fiance, my wife at the time, put my bars on, but the oath of office was given to me by Peyton, who is a foundation member. And
we talked about flying with him in the.
Yep. He flew me in the Cobra, and he corresponded with me. He would send me emails and, just check in on me very regularly all the way through college.
Is he still with us?
He is. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
He's
he needs to join us.
He's in great shape.
I think he needs to join us.
He's still a Marine. He runs every morning.
Yeah.
Was that?
I think he needs to join us. A Vietnam attack pilot? Hell yeah.
Peyton was actually Grenada and Desert Storm. He's only about 4 years older than I am. He's
oh, okay. I thought he was Vietnam.
5 years older.
Misunderstood.
His call sign was his X-Man. But Peyton has been a mentor not only for me. He was the guy that really took over my training in the Army Aviation Heritage Foundation, because Peyton could fly a Cobra. He's got over 6,000 hours in a Cobra. Yeah, he's
the odds of getting that far. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's a Semper Fi Marine.
Go.
He is probably
That's terrifying.
Arguably the world's greatest Cobra pilot in my book. Mark Metzger's right there with him. But Peyton commissioned Jay. Jay has respected him his entire career. And, Jay's fiance, Katie, who also, we haven't talked about at all, he meets her in ROTC, and she was an explosive ordnance disposal officer. So Katie is my bad to the bone daughter-in-law. And I will tell you, when Jay deployed, Katie calls me, and she's sobbing, crying. And you know what I'm thinking.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something horrible happened.
You're a tough VOD.
Yeah.
Well, thank God she's pretty quick to say he has deployed and he's over there with those Iranian gunboats. She calls me and she's sobbing and crying. I'm like, what in the world? What is, I'm immediately thinking something's happened to Jay. And she says, I'm pregnant and I can't stop throwing up. And I'm elated. I'm elated because I know Jay's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm like, let me get your mother-in-law.
That's great.
So she can help you with that. But you just told me I'm going to be a granddad.
Yeah. I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah. 100%.
All right. Second part of the question. It's who? It's I already know the answer, but who pinned on your bars?
Mine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, when President Carter commissioned me,
yes.
My mother and my wife, Camille, pinned my bars on.
Yeah.
But the coolest experience, growing up knowing the President of the United States and having him as a neighbor, he created a lot of unique opportunities for us. One of them was he actually gave me my oath of office. Down there on the commission where it says by the President, he hand wrote his signature.
Nice.
Jimmy Carter. And like I said, I know that there are people with mixed emotions and feelings about what kind of president he was, but I want you to walk away hearing this straight from my heart. He was one of the finest human beings and godly men I have ever known that did so much for humanity, and I couldn't be more proud to have called him friend and neighbor, to my mom and dad, to our family, to have signed my oath of office and provided the opportunities. I'll tell you another funny one, guys. It's not in the book. When he's governor of Georgia, he invited my family to the governor's mansion, he and Ms. Roseland, for dinner, for lunch or dinner, one of the two.
Okay.
We go there. I've never seen an elevator. Amy Carter and I spent the day riding up and down in the elevator because I'd never seen one in my life in Plains, Georgia. So I'm at the governor's mansion as a child, and mom and dad are having lunch with him before he's even thought of running for president. But the lineage and the history and the family ties, to the Carter family go way back. And honestly, his helicopters landing and bringing him in probably had a huge part to do with me getting interested in Army aviation and the reason Jay's there. And here we are as a rotary wing family, having served our country, and we're proud Americans. Well,
that's fantastic. So very cool. What a neat experience to get your oath of office and hand signature.
That's very unique.
President. Yeah. So, well, indeed. Thank you both. We've been going an hour and 40 or so now. So we do need to land the plane, and we want to say thank you both for your service. Thank you to your brides for their sacrifices to
Holy cow, yeah.
Continue to do what you do. And Jay, I know you do sacrifices so your bride can do what she does. That's a big deal. It's not an easy life, but it's unspeakably rewarding. I mean, it's amazing the professionals you get to work with. So thank you for that. Let me also quickly thank Dave Hamilton over at backbeatmedia.com, who provides our advertising for us and technical know-how and all that good stuff. So thank you, Dave.
Thanks to Bago, who's been in the background today. Thank you, sir. And Sticks, who's MIA right now, but he's normally. Yeah. Thanks to Bago for being there for us, buddy.
And we need to thank Badass.
Badass.
I don't know if he's still with us or not. I think he was here earlier. He said he might not make it, but he provided some pretty cool photos for us. BDSaviationphotography.com. We're grateful to you, sir, for allowing us to use your art.
That's a picture of Jeff right there.
Yeah.
Thanks to Badass.
Up on the video. So there he is. Yeah, he's here still with us. So thank you, Badass. Amazing photos. I don't know how he gets. They aren't pictures. They are art. Cool stuff.
Oh,
BDS.
I love that. Yeah, I love the paint job on that too. Yeah. Thanks to HSI Wealth Strategies.
Yeah, for sponsoring.
And what's the other? The Every Plate. Oh, Every Plate.
Thank you, Every Plate, for sponsoring this week. We're deeply humbled and grateful to you for stepping up and sponsoring the show. So. Thank you to our Patreon supporters who have lost all sense of commonality and normalcy. Financial management counseling is in your future because you have cracked your wallets and thrown money at us. Hard-earned though it may be, we are humbled by that.
Very humbled.
We thanked him last week, but we didn't state the amount. And I want to go back. I want to circle back here on Sheriff, who made a $50 donation to the show. We're humbled by that. Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you so much. Show 12, Sheriff was our guest, and this is 149. So, but yeah, show 12, we were on a mission from God. You know, yeah. We did it in an airplane instead of an old caddy. All right. What else, Fig?
Well, if you could give us a rating, make it 5 stars.
Make it so.
Ratings. Yeah, so there I was /rate. If you can't give us 5 stars, tell us what would make it 5 stars, because we're trainable.
Right? We love good feedback. We haven't given these email addresses in a long time either. You can write to fig@sothererwas.us, repeat, REPETE, @sothererwas.us, Bago or Sticks @sothererwas.us, and give us good feedback. If you have a question, a comment, or anything like that, if you have a question, ask Sticks.
Sticks and Bago are the real brains of this whole operation. Truth be known.
Yeah. Merch, man. It's coming up on bikini season soon. SothererWas.us/merch. Get yourself a cool hat like I'm wearing, or a polo shirt, or a bikini, or a beach
flask,
towel, some
towel,
koozies,
hoodie.
Trying to figure out how to get Robin's Bird Brain Designs involved in the whole merch thing, but we've got on the way keychains and flasks and cool stuff that's all personalized to you. So that'll be cool when we do that. I'm trying to think. Why is it? Of course, now it's not playing nice.
Hey, and Bago threw that up for us.
Oh, the book. I can't believe I almost went with
Jeff and Camille Moss.
My Leading Edge by Jeff and Camille Moss. Available on Amazon. Anywhere else, Jeff?
Not right now. I mean, direct from us, but primarily Amazon's the best source.
Yeah. So that's Jeff and Jay on the cover, hanging out there on an attack helicopter, and some other photos throughout the book. Like, good picture book for us Marines.
A lot of pictures, which I really did appreciate. But I like how it's written. I like lessons learned at the end of every chapter too. It's kind of like, a debrief, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
What's that noise?
What else?
What's that sound?
Like we're forgetting somebody.
Well, that's the Dos Gringos. Oh. Those are the Dos Air Force F-16 guys that make the Air Force sound good. They let us use their music. They were guests on our program. I forgot what episode. It seems like a bajillion years ago now.
Right.
And they have 4 albums and not one bad song. If you like humor, you'll love their songs.
It is hilarious. So Seeing as we have rotor heads on, Fig, any advice for folks until next week?
Don't set on the collective.
Don't do it.
Right? Collective?
Collective. The up-down stick.
100%. That's your up and down.
Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the shit I was wearing on that day. Now an F-16 is cramped enough, but it's even worse with all that stuff supposed to save your life. But we knew there was no way. Cause when you're going down the North Atlantic, man, it's over.
Hold on. It's what?
He said it's over.
Where the hell have you been, soldier?
Training, sir! Training, sir!
What kind of training, son?
Army training, sir! Army training, sir!
And we are out.
How apropos was that? I
Right?
never know what you're going to play at the end.
That was awesome.